So I think we have quite a few people who just joined, and I'm thinking there are going to be more who will join, and we're very excited to see the girls in the retreat. We are very excited to host this webinar today, which is Fungal Life Cycle with Sonia Horowitz. This should be a lot of fun, and we have quite a few people attending, even though many people are attending from the same location, which is even more fun. So I just wanted to introduce Sonia really quick. Sonia and her son Liam, who are going to be hosting the webinar together today, right? So Sonia is a forager and an artist, and she's passionate about inspiring families to explore the natural world, the world around them safely and respectfully. And I know that Sonia has wealth of knowledge, wealth of fungal knowledge, and we are very happy to have her here today. And Sonia, I'm just gonna stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Okay, sounds good. Let me get my slides going here. Oh, it's right there. Perfect. Did that work?
That's perfect.
Ready to go. Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Today we are going to learn about how mushrooms appear, because it looks kind of magical, doesn't it? Just rains and then all of a sudden all these fungi are out everywhere. But what you see on the surface is only a very, very small part of the fungal life cycle. Yes, that is one of our mushroom bags we'll be talking about a little bit later. We do grow mushrooms as well as hunt them. So this guy is actually called a blueing bolete, and he has a little smile on his face for you. So let's get started. All right, the first thing I want to talk about are spores. And spores are the equivalent of seeds in mushrooms, but they're a little bit different than seeds. They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Do you remember what spores are coated in to make them tough?
They're coated in, like, gills.
No, not the spores. The spores are coated in chitin, which is the same stuff that all the very, very hard parts of living organisms are made from. And these little chitin-coated goodies are little packets of fungal DNA. And DNA is what creates life. It's the blueprints for life. With a seed, like a plant seed, you only need one of those for it to grow into the corn or the echinacea or whatever it happens to be that it's growing into. But how many do you need with spores, with fungal spores?
You need 2 at least.
Yep, at least 2 fungal spores. These spores are super, super tough. They can survive all sorts of crazy heat. They can survive drought. They can survive very, very cold, extremely cold air. They can survive without water for a very, very long time. So once the spores come out of the mushroom, and I'll explain how that process happens at the end of the life cycle, they can float around in the atmosphere for thousands and thousands of miles because they're very light and are very affected by air currents. So you can get fungi that may have spored out in one continent and it will get blown over to another, which is pretty cool. These cells are called, or what is called monokaryotic, which means they only have 1 nucleus per cell, and they need another parent cell to get together with to do the actual reproduction. That is, this reproduction style is called meiosis, and it also occurs in humans and other animals. So in that regard, fungi are closer to the animal kingdom than they are to the plant kingdom. So in this one, this is a microscopic shot. It's not mine. I pulled it off Google. But this is a microscopic shot of a spore, and it is extending a hyphae, which is, it is only 1 cell thick, and it's kind of like a thread-like structure. And what is the hyphae looking for?
The hyphae is looking for 2 spores.
Well, it's looking for hyphae from another spore that it can join with. And it's called cell maining, also called karyogamy is the scientific term. term. So the spore will land on a suitable substrate, which just means it lands on something it likes to eat. So it will land somewhere that's safe for it to start reproducing, and it will extend its hyphae looking for a suitable mate. And once these two hyphae meet, then that's when the real growth starts to occur and the DNA is fused together and the actual fungal body is formed. So the hyphae then will start producing lots more hyphae, and it turns into this kind of web-like structure, and that is called, starts with an M?
Mating.
No, mycelium.
Mycelium.
So once that has occurred, the hyphae start to form this fuzzy web, and it shows up as kind of a thread-like fuzzy texture, which I'll show you on the next slide. And right after it does this reproduction, it starts sending out special infantry cells where it pushes through the substrate. It pushes through what it's trying to digest. And this is called colonization or nutrient capture, because it will keep spreading out until it meets a barrier or a competitor. And a barrier could be, like in our grow setups, our barrier is the plastic bag. It meets that wall and it can't digest that. So then it will start to reproduce itself and form an even thicker mat of mycelium. On this slide here, we have a fungal grow or an oyster grow we did 2 years ago on some fabric scraps, and all that fuzzy white stuff that looks kind of like snow, that's the mycelium of the oyster fungus. So what it's doing now, after it's branched out and colonized and captured its territory, now it's going back and digesting everything in there. So it reproduces a whole lot of mycelium. It makes as much surface area as it can. Because when we eat food, where does the food go?
It goes in our stomach.
Goes inside.
And then it goes to our private
Yes,
parts.
thank you. Thank you for that. What happens with fungi, though? Do they eat inside?
No. They eat outside.
They eat outside their body. They live in the food that they're digesting. They secrete special digestive enzymes. Some species, the oyster included, secrete enzymes that lure in like nematodes and other microbes that they will lasso and catch, and then they will feed off those as well. And there are a few different ways that mushrooms feed. These ones right here only eat already dead organic material. These are oyster mushrooms. So they've filled as much space as possible and are digesting all the nutrients in there. This is what you'll see out in the woods. If you see a log with all this fuzzy white stuff, that is fungal mycelium. And eventually you will have some sort of mushroom popping up. Without a microscope, it's difficult to tell what the fungus is. There are a few that have specially colored mycelium, like the shiitake will go brown after it's done digesting, and the chicken of the woods is a little bit orangish, so you can see that. And then there's the cup fungus that turns wood blue, which is kind of neat. So they are in there digesting all the lignin in that wood, which is the stuff that makes the wood really hard and durable. And nothing else can really eat that but fungi. So we really need them to be the cleaning crew there. So to recap, you started with the spore, 2 spores actually, and they put hyphae out to try to find each other. And then once they mated, they turn into the mycelium. Now, once the fungi is under some kind of stress, either it's running out of nutrients, it got too cold, too hot, too much water, maybe the light outside there's not enough light anymore, it will start to channel all of the nutrients it can, channel all of the nutrients and water and mycelial mass to certain spots that it's picked out. And you can see our mushroom bag here, where our mushrooms are starting to pop out. This is where I put holes in the bag. So the gas exchange and the air exchange is good for the oyster to poke out right there, because mushrooms do need oxygen to grow. They absolutely need oxygen and airflow. So it's selected a spot to channel all of the nutrients and some extra mycelial mass to this area, and that is where the mushroom is starting to form. Again, it's usually determined by airflow. So if you find it on a tree, there's probably a crack in that bark or something that it's coming out of. If you see on here, here is our fabric scrap mushroom grow. There's tiny little mushrooms all over it. These are tiny little Oyster Primordia. Primordia are basically baby mushrooms. They don't have their spores in there yet. In this stage, they're pretty fragile still. They can dry out very easily. They can sunburn pretty easily, depending on the species. Again, they don't contain spores quite yet. They're not quite there yet. They're just forming the spore-bearing structures. And these guys are on fabric scraps, which is pretty neat. This is a different kind of Primordia. It is the button or egg stage of an Amanita. Amanitas grow singly. They don't grow in clusters like the oysters, so you'll usually just see this one egg-type thing on the ground, which can be confused with puffballs, but we'll talk about that in the anatomy lecture next week. So they will wait. Usually at this stage, it happens pretty fast. The actual fruiting body grows within just a couple days, and it's really fun to watch when you grow them at home, just how fast this actually happens. And then here they are a little bit more advanced. This is a nice healthy oyster cluster, and it's getting ready to start producing the spores. It's not quite there yet. It's not fully open. These are just slightly under mature. And you could harvest mushrooms in this stage, but I like to wait until the actual spore-bearing structure occurs because usually it tastes better. And then you give it a chance to respore itself. This is especially important in wild fungi, not as important in the cultivated fungi, unless you're trying to collect the spores. So here are the oysters, and they're all fanned out, and these guys have gills under them that are holding all of the spores. And this is a mature oyster patch that volunteered in my garden. And there are lots of different spore-bearing structures. These ones in particular have gills, but there are many other spore-bearing structures as well. These guys are fully mature fungi. They are actually a little bit overly mature. They probably already dropped their spores, but as you can see, these don't have gills at all. These have little teeth under them, and they have specialized cells that hold the spore mass, and then they participate in sporulation. These are puffballs, which are really fun. Every kid loves puffballs, right?
Yeah. Whenever you step on them or put your finger on one when they're brown, brown spores come out.
That's right. All that cloudy stuff is puffball spores. This is called sporulation. Now, sporulation is very, very forceful. It doesn't just gently drop off like a dandelion seed floating away. It usually has a lot of force behind it. It uses water pressure. So that's why when you touch these puffballs, they go poof, instead of just, crinkling up. This enables the very, very light spores to travel a really long distance. They travel really far away because the parent fungus, it will refruit. I, off the top of my head, can't think of any that only fruit once. So it will refruit in the same spot in the next season, or oysters sometimes flush more than once. So the parent fungus doesn't want to be competing with its children, with its offspring, so it makes sure the spores are ejected really far away. And every mushroom produces billions and billions and billions of spores, which kind of goes to show you how much chance is involved in the production of a fungus, because in this big wide world, these two tiny microscopic spores have to find each other on just the right substrate at just the right time, just the right weather, so that they can produce fungus, which is pretty cool. And also something we need to think about when we're harvesting fungi, that, it's a pretty miraculous occurrence that these two things can find each other. So that is the end of the life cycle, the sporulation. After that, these guys are dropping spores right now, and after that, they will decay. Some of them decay very rapidly, and others, a lot of the bracket mushrooms, like the birch brackets and things, tend to stick around for a good long while. But they do stop producing spores after a while. they have a finite number of spores. They don't continually produce them. There are 3 classifications of fungi based on life cycle. There's a lot of classifications, but based on life cycle, the ones that we talk about the most often are the saprophytic mushrooms. Remember what that is? What do they do?
They
Where they eat?
They eat the wood.
Yes, they eat decaying, they eat dead organic material. They are the ones who are decaying them. So they are the cleaners. What would happen in the woods if we didn't have these cleaners?
There would be like logs everywhere, and there wouldn't be any room for plants.
Yep, that's right. There would be no room for new growth if we didn't have these fungi in there breaking down all this super tough lignin and turning into wonderful soil for the plants. And the next one are the mycorrhizal. Do you remember what those ones do?
Mycorrhizal are medicinal.
No, not quite. Good try. Mycorrhizal, myco meaning fungal, rhizal meaning having to do with roots. So the mycorrhizal mushrooms are ones that form a symbiotic relationships with the roots of plants. Many trees have special fungi that they form relationships with, and these mycorrhizal fungi are the gardeners. They kind of control the flow of nutrients, and they can control information flow as well. So if you have, say, an aspen being attacked by a certain beetle, it can send signals to the other aspen trees, usually through something like a honey fungus, which is also kind of parasitic, but it can send signals that alert the other trees so they can produce compounds that will repel that pest. So that's pretty interesting. If you look online, you can look up the Wood Wide Web, and it is like a fungal internet in the forest, which is pretty neat. And then the third categorization of fungi based on life cycle are the parasitic fungi. And that seems really bad to have a parasitic fungi that's feasting on somebody else's nutrients. But usually these fungi can only get in an already injured or sick plant. So they're in there kind of thinning the herd so that these sick and injured plants aren't infecting everybody else. And they tend to be the population control, which allows the strongest of the plants and things to survive. So did you think of any questions?
No, but if you're watching this right now, it's live on May 5th.
Okay, yes, thank you. So that is the fungal life cycle. Let's recap it really briefly. So we start with a what?
We start with the spore.
We start with a spore, and then what does the spore do?
Then it tries to mate with another
Yep, it
spore.
extends its hyphae, which is a single cell thread-like structure. It extends its hyphae to meet another one, and then they participate in karyogamy, which is cell mating. Yep. So they participate in cell mating, and the hyphae then branches out and becomes mycelium and colonizes or nutrient captures the substrate that it is in, usually wood or like we have fabric scraps. These ones actually colonize Liam's homework. They are eating old homework. So they do the nutrient capture and claim their territory. Then they double back and produce even more mycelial mass to get a greater surface area. And then they digest the territory that they captured. And then after that, once they are put under some kind of stress, they funnel resources to certain selected areas where they can produce the fruiting body, which is what we see that are the mushrooms. And then the mushrooms produce the spores and sporulation, and it starts all over again. So that is the fungal life cycle. And I would like to open the floor to any questions you might have. We would be happy to answer anything you might wonder about this.
I know.
Okay, so thank you so much, guys. Thank you all. Ola, good to see you. You guys have fun there. It looks amazing.
Thank you. Same here. Weather is gorgeous, so we're really enjoying.
Yes, today is an amazing day.
Yep, we've got good sunshine here too. We got to go out and get some gardens ready.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of work for gardeners for sure these days.
That's right.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.